On this episode of Bombastic, we're going to take a look at the worst Star Wars ground vehicles and tanks used by each of the factions. Hey everyone, it's Andrew! And welcome to this Star Wars Factions Compared video. Today, I'm joined by a special guest.
Hey everyone, it's EckhartsLadder. It's great to be here, thanks for having me. Today, Andrew and I are going to be comparing the worst ground vehicles from the Separatists, Republic, Empire, Rebellion, First Order, and Resistance. Then at the end, we'll determine which one we think is the absolute worst of them all.
Before we get started, we wanted to mention that we made another one of these videos for EckhartsLadder's channel, where we compare the worst ships and starfighters. This is part of his Factions Compared series, and there are some pretty hilariously bad ships out there, so if you want to check that out, you can go over to his channel or follow the link in the description. Alright, so the worst vehicle Star Wars has ever produced. We've gone and chosen one vehicle for each faction based on obvious design flaws, lack of functionality, and basically just how much these vehicles made us laugh.
Now remember, just because a ship is ugly or weird looking or isn't traditionally designed doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. In this episode, we'll be focusing more on ships which not only don't make sense or are not pretty on the eyes, but which also fail to operate effectively. A beautiful ship can be terribly ineffective, and an ugly ship can work quite well. Again, we're looking here at functionality.
Okay, so first up, we have the Separatists OG-9 homing spider droid. These were used heavily during the Battle of Geonosis and throughout the Clone Wars. Now, what I don't like about them is that they have these long legs that look to be super vulnerable, and they look like spiders. And I don't like spiders. Oh, and if you breach that big ball in the middle, its core, they explode. Pretty dramatically too.
Yeah, in my mind, the OG-9 is sort of a mixed bag. On one hand, it has a good view of the battlefield with its tall legs, it's relatively nimble, and it has a decent amount of weaponry. However, as Andrew mentioned, it's also extremely vulnerable. The legs can be taken out without too much directed firepower, and the center of the walker, which is the largest target, will catastrophically destroy the walker if punctured. Still, at least it's an offensive threat, and compared to some of the other vehicles on this list, it's really not that bad.
Next up, we have the Republic's all-terrain open transport, or AT-OT. Okay, so basically this thing is similar to the AT-TE, except it doesn't have a big gun. It has more legs, and for some reason they left the roof open, therefore the name Open Transport. Okay, so my first question, why leave the roof open? I mean, this just makes it seem like the clones who are going to be transported on top are much more open and vulnerable to attack and rain and thunder and lightning and everything that's outside, basically. Also, why so many legs? I mean, it's like a centipede. Seriously, this looks like an engineer's nightmare. Why the heck does it need this many legs?
Also, it should be noted that the prime advantage that walkers have over wheeled vehicles is their ability to conquer difficult terrain. However, with a body as long and bulky as that of the AT-OT, I don't see any reason why you would ever choose this vehicle over, say, a Juggernaut tank, something that is not only more well armored and can easily protect soldiers, but which also carries more firepower. I know it's cool looking, but the AT-OT is ultimately unnecessary. It leaves its troops open to fire, and it's not even really very heavily armed.
Okay, next, and you're gonna love this one. The Empire's TIE tank. So someone decided to use a TIE fighter, take the wings off, replace them with tank treads, and behold, you have the TIE tank. The cockpit for this one is literally the same cockpit in the TIE fighter, only one person can fit inside. Everything about this tank is bad. First of all, visibility is terrible. Regular TIE fighters have bad visibility and no peripheral vision, as the pilots can only look out of the front window, so the same goes for this tank. And also, TIE fighters seem to be super fragile when it comes to aerial combat. Sure, they're quick and they have good maneuverability, but as soon as they get hit, they generally fall apart and crash or explode, as history goes. So what they've done here is put an already extremely vulnerable vehicle on the ground and taken away its speed and flight. So what's the point of having a tank with weak armor? You tell me.
Yeah, the TIE tank is super foolish. It comes from the Dark Empire comic book series, which is one of the sillier parts of Star Wars canon, but which has a special place in my heart. But if I have to look at this vehicle honestly, it makes no sense. First, it's supposedly a tank, but it has hardly any weapons. The weapons that it does have are permanently fixed facing forward. This is basically asking for a sneaky rebel to come up from behind it and blow it up with some C4 or whatever the Star Wars equivalent is. I really don't see why this is needed. TIE fighters can already do a good job taking out ground-based targets, and things like hover tanks, I think, would be much more effective. Here, we really just have some classic, crappy, unoriginal Imperial design at work.
So next, we have the Rebellion's Tauntaun. Ah yes, everyone's favorite furry snow creatures. It's not really that Tauntauns are really all that bad. They definitely serve their purpose on their native world of Hoth. It's just that Han's Tauntaun froze in the cold, but somehow Han was still okay? I mean, I guess at least they smell better on the outside, right?
Does the Tauntaun have the weaponry or the armor of a modern Star Wars battle tank? No, perhaps not, but you know what it does have? It has heart. The Tauntauns were actually a fairly genius response by the rebels to the conditions on the planet Hoth. Snowspeeders were highly maintenance intensive, and it wasn't practical to take them out every time you need to check out an asteroid landing. Other ships like X-Wings generally couldn't work on the planet just because it was so cold. There comes in the Tauntaun, a vehicle so to speak that's available at any time and that is relatively reliable, although perhaps not in the coldest part of a Hoth night. But they seem to be loyal, they seem to be fast, they seem to be relatively hardy. I don't know, if you can just strap a gun to one, it'd pretty much be perfect.
Next, we have the First Order's All-Terrain Heavy Scout, or ATHS, which at the moment only exists as Lego and was cut from The Last Jedi, but hey! We're doing it. But doesn't that tell you enough about it already? It was so bad, it didn't even make the movie. So what I love about this little guy is that it looks like if you pushed it from one side, it would completely topple over and be helplessly defeated. It's got these crab legs here to stabilize it, but also a set of 4 very narrow and compact wheels underneath its base. It honestly looks more like something the Separatist army would have in its arsenal, but which would make more sense to me, because with both its legs and wheels, it looks incredibly hard to drive or pilot. Remember, this isn't a droid. Someone's actually got to figure out how to control this thing.
The all-terrain heavy scout is certainly an interesting weapon. I actually like its design from a visual standpoint. It's very different from any other walkers that we see in the Star Wars universe. It sort of scuttles along like the robots from the movie Interstellar. I think ultimately though, the idea of having several of these small vehicles doesn't make a lot of sense. I think what the First Order went with in the actual The Last Jedi movie, a single large polar, is a lot better. Still, as Andrew has identified, there are serious issues with this vehicle. I wonder how weaponized it is, what kind of armor it has. It seems like it would be a fairly vulnerable target. I'm not sure if the thing is actually meant to have wheels underneath the legs like Andrew suggests. I think that that's possible, but it may also be that it just scuttles and the wheels were the only way that LEGO could represent that motion. I don't know, just overall this thing is a really mixed bag for me.
Finally, we have the Resistance Ski Speeder. Alright, now I'll be the first to admit that yes, these do look really cool shooting across the surface of Crate with all the red salt flying up, but that's not why they're on this list. To me, the Ski Speeder is a real rebel ship. Cheap looking, half broken, and lacking the ability to actually fly. These are believable ships that a beaten down rebellion would be able to afford to build and use. What I also think is really bad about their design is the way the ship is structured. So over here we have the cockpit, in the middle we have this massive engine, and over here we have 2 laser cannons. It really doesn't surprise me these things are so bumpy and fragile. It's almost like a really badly designed pod racer.
The Resistance Ski Speeder. For me, this goes firmly into the category, as do some of the other vehicles on this list, of why isn't this just a speeder or a spaceship? I don't see any reason why this thing should be tethered to the ground. I do get the idea that it's supposed to be cheap, but stabilizing it and using a sort of cheap propulsion system makes no sense for me. We see, for example, how easily these things are picked off by TIE fighters because they can only operate side to side and back and forth. If they had that extra wide dimension, I think they would be much more dangerous vehicles. I do like that they're fast and nimble and can likely operate on harsh terrain, but I wish that they were just a little bit better.
Alright, so now what we're going to do is rank the vehicles from bad to absolute worst. So coming in at number 6 is the Tauntaun. These guys served their purpose and couldn't really help that Han Solo took them out into the cold, freezing night.
Yeah, Tauntauns are good. I mean, of course we do see one break down, but I think they go to show that sometimes the best option is the one that's not over-engineered.
At number 5 is the OG-9 homing spider droid. I mean, the long legs make them able to step over things, I guess, I don't know.
The spider droid has a lot of potential. Like many Confederate vehicles, it's extremely tall, so it can get a good view of the battlefield. It also has good weapons, and its main weakness is that it's relatively vulnerable to even small arms fire. Give this thing a shield and I think it goes up a further spot on this list.
The 4th worst vehicle goes to the Resistance ski speeders, mainly just because they look really cool skiing across the surface of Crate. Not because of their functionality or anything, you know.
To me, the ski speeder exists at this point only because the later ships are worse. I mean, this thing is fine, but as we saw during The Last Jedi, even a squad of TIE fighters could likely wipe out all of the Resistance's forces. Thank God for the Millennium Falcon.
At number 3, we have the First Order's AT-HS, mainly because it was so bad, it didn't even make the final cut of The Last Jedi.
Yeah, the AT-HS is just meh. I don't think there's really a whole lot more that I can say about it.
The second worst vehicle is the Republic's AT-OT. This thing literally does nothing a ship couldn't do, but it also leaves its poor passengers open to the elements. I mean, what happens if it rains? Do you really think your clone brother brought a spare umbrella?
The AT-OT is a silly vessel. I think if I were a clone trooper, I'd rather get out and walk. At least that way, I'm not a huge elevated target. I think that this thing really deserves the second worst spot on this list.
And number 1, the absolute worst Star Wars ground vehicle of all time, the Empire's TIE tank.
It's a TIE tank. What else can we say? I love the Dark Empire series, but some of the designs from that comic are just ludicrous, and this is one of them. This basically takes everything bad about the TIE fighter and removes its one good asset, its speed, instead of anchoring it to the ground. This thing hardly even has weapons. The TIE tank is just awful, and it is, in my mind, one of the worst ground vehicles in the Star Wars universe, and certainly the worst one on this list.
So there's our list. Obviously this is just our opinion, but if you want to have your say, let us know which Star Wars ground vehicle you think is the absolute worst of all time. You can vote up here in the top right corner or leave a comment down in the description. Is there another vehicle we didn't talk about in this list you've always thought was really bad? Let us know down below.
As Andrew said, make sure you head over to my channel and check out the other video that we worked on together. You think that this list had a silly TIE variant, wait until you see what else the Empire had in store. And hey, if these two videos perform well together, Andrew and I are very likely to work together in the future, so make sure you not only check it out, but also leave a like on each.
I'd like to give a special thanks to EckhartsLadder for working on these two videos with me. It was a blast, man. Anyway, we hope you all enjoyed this video, and let us know if you want to see more of this type of content. We've got a lot of Battlefront 2 funny moments and gameplay coming out in the next few weeks, as well as a few other videos, so keep an eye out for them. Anyway, thanks for watching everyone, see you next time. Take care.
Thanks to you guys for tuning in, and hey, may the Force be with you.
Stay bombastic.